What was this threat to the Jewish state that had the Israeli government so concerned? What enemy had the capability to strike this kind of fear in the hearts of a recognized military power? The answer laid nearly 600 miles to the east in Baghdad, Iraq, home of Saddam Hussein.
An article appeared in one of the major Baghdad newspapers saying that they would have a nuclear bomb to neutralize Israel.
Whatever Saddam's intentions were, he knew Iraq did not possess the resources necessary to develop a nuclear weapon. What his country did have in abundance was oil and billions in cash to spend. So, armed with these two irresistible commodities, Saddam went shopping for a reactor and quickly found a supplier, French Prime Minister Jacques Chirac and the French government. When the agreement was announced in 1975, the French government defended their actions. The facility would be purely a civilian reactor, used for energy purposes only. While many accepted this explanation, there were those who doubted the rationale. Within weeks of the announced agreement, construction on the reactor began just outside of Baghdad. Saddam named the soon-to-be-built reactor after the Babylonian month of Tammuz, the very same month in which Nebuchadnezzar began his assault on the Jewish people in 586 BC. Having verified the capabilities of the reactor through several international independent sources, Prime Minister Begin found himself with only one option: set into motion a plan, either through diplomacy, espionage, or military action, to stop the reactor from going hot. Leaving him with very few alternatives, Begin reluctantly instructed his military commanders to begin planning Operation Opera. At the same time, Begin instructed the Mossad, Israel's famed secret service agency, to proceed with their own particular methods of delaying the construction.
The Mossad had found that the French were about ready to ship the core of the nuclear reactor to Iraq, and it was being stored at a warehouse in a French town on the Mediterranean.
They put two charges of explosive to quote-unquote destroy the place.
It did not destroy it enough, though. It could be patched up, and Iraq decided to patch it up, but it took another 6 months, so they delayed it for another 6 months.
The Mossad was also able to infiltrate the French Atomic Energy Commission and identified a top Egyptian nuclear scientist working for Saddam in Paris. In a scenario right out of a spy novel, the agents offered him sex, money, and power in exchange for information on the reactor.
He was not interested in doing any business with them. So the Mossad decided to just take him out then.
On Saturday, June 14th, 1980, Dr. Yahya El-Meshid checked into the upscale Meridian Hotel in Paris.
Mossad, bad guys, send an escort girl to the room of that poor guy.
When he opened the door, they slit his throat.
They didn't steal anything.
Now, a prostitute had been in the hallway. She fled, but she contacted the police. And before she was able to be interviewed, a black Mercedes ran her over and then disappeared. So she was killed before she was able to say anything.
Over the course of the development of the reactor, various news agencies reported that nearly a dozen nuclear scientists working on the project lost their lives. Many of the deaths were blamed on the Mossad. Despite the espionage, the murders, the sabotage, it was clear to the Israelis that nothing was going to stop Saddam from completing the construction of the reactor. On June 1st, the French newspaper Le Point reported that the construction of the reactor was complete. It would now only be a matter of months before the facility was fully operational. 5 days later, Prime Minister Begin summoned General Ivry to his residence. The operation, he announced, will take place the day after tomorrow, Sunday, June 7th. The necessity for such a dangerous mission came only after all other attempts to halt the construction of the reactor failed. Sunday, June 7, 1981, was another typical summer day throughout Israel. From the holy city of Jerusalem to the modern metropolis of Tel Aviv, there was nothing to indicate this was going to be anything but just another Sunday. However, at Eitzion, the secret Israeli air base in the Sinai, June 7th was anything but typical. All of the pilots had reported to the base the day before, and now they were busy thoroughly inspecting each of the F-16s. Planning of the mission, dubbed Operation Opera, had been underway for over 3 years. But right from the start, Prime Minister Begin and his staff were hoping, even praying the raid would never have to take place. It is early in June 1981. Despite relative peace between Israel and the Arab world, Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin gives the green light for a top-secret military operation to proceed. Moments later, 8 F-16 jets taxied down the runway of a secret Israeli airbase in the Sinai Desert, carrying a weight that exceeds nearly twice the design specs of the aircraft. With the additional weight, the jets struggle to get airborne, but do so with precious little runway left. Finally, after years of secrecy, planning, and espionage, a mission that could determine the very fate of Israel is underway. Minutes after the attack, Begin received a call from General Ivry. The bombing was a complete success. 90 minutes later, he received more good news. All the pilots had returned alive. Everything had gone as planned. As Israel had expected, the UN voted unanimously to condemn Israel for the attack. But despite demands from Vice President Bush and Arab nations for harsh sanctions against Israel, none was ever enacted.
Israel has nothing to apologize for. We decided to act now, before it is too late.